Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch break. So let's launch the second half of this European Joint Conference with our third panel on the role of presenters in the emergence of new forms of writings and the issue of shared risks with artists, authors. I have with me on stage Tim Behren, Caroline Sotta, and Agathe Dumont. I leave the floor to you.
Well, thank you, and welcome to this new roundtable. So we have Tim Behren, who works as a choreographer, circus artist, and curator, and you're the director, artistic director of the company Overhead Project, and you graduated from a circus school. And you're also head of the Circus Dance Festival in Cologne. And Caroline Sotta, who has been working in the field of performing arts, culture for the past 14 years, and specifically contemporary circus and street arts, street performing arts. And you worked, you had different roles in the circus sector or in the performing arts sector. And now you work as je n'ai plus ton titre exact, cultural attaché at the French Institute in Serbia since September 2023. And you're also the coordinator of the Theatroscope program, and you will probably talk about it later. So let's start. So we're gonna kind of build a relationship between also the two roundtables. The idea here was also to discuss differently about how do we see artistic works and how those new writings emerge and in what conditions. And I wanted to start with another text. I'm the text provider today, which is from an art historian, which is called Daniel Arras, a French art historian. And it's a text about how do we look. And it's Daniel Arras is a fundamental theoretician in the field of visual arts, but I think, again, what he says is very relevant also for performing arts. And this text is in the form of a letter that Daniel Arras writes, addresses to one of his fellow art historian colleague, talking about how they look at works in different ways. So same thing, I will read it in English and in French. So the text is in French originally. So the text starts with Cara Giulia, and this Giulia is a fake character. It's not a real person. We have the same passion for painting. How is it that when it comes to interpreting certain works, we can be so far apart? I don't claim that works have only one meaning and that there is only one right interpretation. Gombrich, another art historian, said that, and you know what I think, what concerns me is rather the kind of screen made of text, quotation, and external references that you seem to there is something missing in the text in English, that you seem to, at all cost, at certain moments, to want to interpose between yourself and the work, a kind of filter, a kind of sun filter that would protect you from the brilliance of the work and preserve the acquired habits in which our academic community is founded and recognizes itself. Perhaps that's the essence of what separates us. It seemed that if you start from the text, that you need the text to interpret the paintings, as if you don't trust your eyes to see, nor the paintings to show you on their own what the painter wanted to express. Alors, en français, nous avons la même passion pour la peinture. Comment se fait-il qu'au moment d'interpréter certaines œuvres, nous puissions être aussi loin l'un de l'autre? Je ne prétends pas que les œuvres n'auraient qu'un seul sens et qu'il n'y en aurait donc qu'une seule bonne interprétation. Ça, c'est Gombrich qui l'a dit et tu sais ce que j'en pense. Donc Gombrich, historien de l'art. Non, ce qui me préoccupe, c'est plutôt le type d'écran fait de textes, de citations et de références extérieures que tu sembles à tout prix, à certains moments, vouloir interposer entre toi et l'œuvre. Une sorte de filtre solaire qui te protégerait de l'éclat de l'œuvre et préserverait les habitudes acquises dans lesquelles se fonde et se reconnaît notre communauté académique. C'est peut-être là l'essentiel de ce qui nous sépare. On dirait que tu pars des textes, que tu as besoin des textes pour interpréter les tableaux, comme si tu ne faisais confiance ni à ton regard pour voir, ni au tableau pour te montrer. De même, ce que le peintre a voulu exprimer. So perhaps it seems a bit far from what we're discussing, but it's also a kind of an answer to what we were discussing before lunch on audiences and how do we look. But I think that this question of how do we look is quite close to what we want to discuss today. Of course, this roundtable will not only be on how do we look at artworks, but also, and perhaps a bit more, on how we create the condition for artworks to be seen. So therefore, we will again talk about how do we work, how do we make things possible, like this morning for new writings, but this time from a different point of view, so presenters and institutions. This is why, to relate also this idea of how do we look and how do we work on looking at artworks and sharing them to audiences, which is in a way your job, but in a very different way. I've asked everyone to come with a memory or something, an artwork that was particularly important for them, because it was important for them as audiences, but also perhaps from their professional point of view, because this artwork raised questions, interrogations. So we will start from this today, from our look as audiences, and then move on to how do we also work with what we see and the idea of how do we see artworks. Who want to start? The exercise of the day. Alors, vas-y. Non, il n'y a pas de slide.
Is it working? Yeah. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much, Circus Next, for invitation. Very strong memory of a show was La Forteresse du Sourire, Smile Fortress by Kuro Tanino, Japanese director. I've seen it in Théâtre de Gennevilliers 3 years ago in the frame of Festival d'Automne, Autumn Festival. It was a theater play, so Kuro Tanino is a psychiatrist at first, and he's very also focused on scenography, so his plays are very cinematographic visually, so there is a very strong also focus on the atmosphere, like visual atmosphere, and it's about, it's 2 flats that you see like, as if one building was cut and you see 2 flats next to each other. In one flat there is fishermen talking about their daily job, and in the other flat there is a family, so the grandmother is sick and the father and granddaughter are taking care of the grandmother. And it was very, very strong, very Japanese. What overwhelms me of Japanese culture is very small things, and you say everything in very small details. So yeah, it was overwhelming.
A strong memory, thank you. And perhaps we see you already said it was on stage at the theater in Gennevilliers in France, but you talk immediately about like in a film or photography, so we see immediately that the references also to other mediums is important, as it can be theater, but still the reference to a movie, to film, to images can be strong. Perhaps, Tim, do you want to?
Yes, I'm also happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I brought Julian Vogel with me in my mind. I guess many of you know him, and maybe we can start with a little video, because I brought, and we will watch 1 minute of the beginning of a documentary that Circus Dance Festival, the festival I'm directing in Cologne in Germany, and we produced about several artists, for example, also about Claudio Stellato, who was already here, but Julian Vogel, Laura Murphy, and others. And the idea is it's maybe also one of our tools to make visible how circus creation functions and how different artists work. So I thought, when you asked me that question, I thought, great, then let's have a look at the work of Julian Vogel for a minute. That's the photo.
It started in the kitchen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I brought this work of Julian Vogel. It somehow maybe also connected a bit to some thoughts of the philosophy of Circus Dance Festival. So first of all, what I find here interesting and why I brought this is, like, here we see an artist at work and we would not say he's a circus artist. That's here he is in his creation center where he makes this porcelain, china. He uses this term china, which is the English word for porcelain, a specific sort of ceramic. And here he's working. So, and I find this striking, like when I think of Diablo and when I talk about his work and tell people about him, then I think, okay, he's a Diablo artist, circus artist at the base, but he does this objects out of China, and this is something that we would not automatically bring together. And I think this is in itself, that's for me a very strong potential of specific circus works maybe that are not automatically like put in this category of circus, that they question circus in itself already. So that this can be circus working around objects and the materiality. Yeah, this I found something very special, and it's maybe also where circus dancers were looking for this kind of works that question circus. And yeah, this is one work that does it very strongly. There's maybe also, I will add a few thoughts about this work. I found very interesting, like there's a tendency in the moment of like circus works to getting more into museums. So this is one direction. What happens like in another institutional context. So there's circus works that are perceived as a form of fine arts, or there is like here Julian does it also using tools of another disciplines of fine arts and bringing it in a circus context. So there's often these two directions. And this is also very interesting. We find it in a lot of circus works is playing with these other formats of another discipline. For example, here doing a durational work or an installation. So that means already seeing a circus work, maybe often there is the expectation from the audience that it happens in a collective setting. So either in a black box or another sort of theatrical space where we're sitting together and we have this collective moment. And in the museum we have a different temporality, so more individualized experience. We can walk in the space as we like, and we can spend as much time watching as we like. And so already playing with this, that a circus work changes the format, I find also something interesting because it already changes some expectations.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we're already talking about circulations and moving borders and seeing that sometimes some spaces where we show artworks can be identified as a museum, performing arts festival, and sometimes we have in-between spaces, and sometimes we work also across disciplines. We're not, and this shows how the question is complex and how identities also can be moving. And I also played the game of working on my own specific memory, and I brought you Matthew Barney, which is a visual artist actually, but when I saw his installation in Fondation Cartier in Paris, I couldn't say what it was. Was it an art? It was a museum, so as you said, I could spend any time, a long time if I wish, but it was a film, so it has a beginning and an end, like in a performance, so in a way it could also have been that I start the film at 2 p.m. and then it's over, like in a performance. And the images in the film were something that it could be circus, it could be dance. And the film, the installation is called Secondary. It's and Matthew Barney worked on the memory of a American football game where a player was shocked at the head and had a concussion. And it was a strong memory from his when he was a teenager and he was playing American football. And he did this movie with old dancers, but very athletic body moving in a space, and the film mixes images of those bodies and images of his studio also. So working with a lot of materials, as we have seen in those images. And the final object is so strange that for me it's impossible to put it in a category. And it could be in your festival, for example. You can invite Matthew Barney. I can show you only the trailer because I don't have anything more, and the trailer is not as old trailers, very interesting.
I can just add also my memories of seeing the first documentations of the first works, or one of the works of Matthew Barney, where he made like the act of painting, a physical one, no, like jumping on the trampoline, trying to paint the ceiling. So there's also a connection, with the physicality that we share in circus and in dance, and also in other art forms, of course.
It's very short and it's a trailer, so. So yeah, here we are. So you need to see the work to... Je vais revenir en arrière pour qu'on ait les images après. Voilà. Let's start. Let's have this. So I think that each of us choose an example to show how do we look is not in... We don't look through categories. We look through our experience. So my first question would be how this can be translated in the way you work. Both in kind of institution, a festival, an institution, a cultural institution, where, of course, we are always confronted to moving borders, to reinventing new ways of sharing art forms, of supporting new writings in different fields, like we see dance, circus, visual arts, etc. So my first question will be perhaps, what tools do you use in your work, in your day-to-day reality, in a way, to kind of keep on moving and keep the way you look at things moving, so that you are able also to invent new ways of, or new, supporting new writings or inventing new ways of sharing to audiences those artistic projects. Caroline, perhaps if you want to talk about your experience in Serbia, or other experiences, of course.
Yeah, there are actually two levels on which I can talk. So the first one would be the French Institute in Serbia. So as a cultural attaché, I work on every cultural fields, so not only dance and circus, but also visual arts, architecture, music, cinema. So I feel very privileged because I also meet all the cultural operators in those networks. And as French Institute, we don't work as programmer, so we don't organize ourselves events or manifestations ex nihilo. But most of the time we support initiatives by local operators, and we also sometimes help them, not like financially, but also we co-build some projects together, so in every field. So this is for the French Institute in Serbia, and also I'm also running a performing arts program called Teatroscope, so maybe we can show the map, because it's more on the regional scale. So region meaning Southeastern Europe. So it's 13 countries of Southeastern Europe. So it's a very heterogeneous area, because you have countries in the European Union, countries outside of European Union. You have ex-Yugoslavian countries, you have ex-Sovietic countries. So on this area, the dynamic is a bit different. Because we are also grant provider. As French Institute in Serbia, we are also grant provider. But with the Teatroscope, we have an open call, yearly open call. So the criteria are defined at the beginning of the year, and so the cultural operators in the region can also apply for a project which implies at least 2 countries in the area. So yeah, you can see the map. So for Teatroscope, we have a yearly open call, and we are, as with French Institute in Serbia, we are very connected to the partners in terms of, we try to discuss as much as possible, also to address the needs and the projects they're organizing and the issues they are facing. So for Teatroscope, we work on the touring, but also, touring French shows in the region, but also cooperation. So we try to build as much as possible some bilateral cooperations between French organizations and regional organizations, such as with French Institute in Serbia. And at the French Institute global level, we are also connected to the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to the headquarters of French Institute in Paris. So there is also priorities and guidelines that we follow according to some artistic fields are more priorities than others, depending on the year.
But you were also saying when we discussed that depending also on the cultural context of each country, of course, the way the same show could be shown in different countries were not the same, or not the same means, but not the same audiences, not the same expectations. So it was also understanding what those differences were and how do we perhaps adapt the way something is shown in different cultural contexts. Can we adapt?
Actually, as you can see on the map, so the area is wide and very heterogeneous according to the countries. So we are not the expert. French institutes everywhere in the area. We're not the experts of the local field and the audience, so we really rely on the local operators because they know, of course, the best what kind of show they are interested in showing in their countries, according also to what the audience is used to, and also what they want to develop on the long run. So we're trying to help them implement what feels important locally. So it can be very different from one country to each other. And also because globally, in the whole area, there's not so much of public fundings, also in the long run. So you don't have the same obstacles in this area comparing to France. And within this area also, between the countries, it can be very, very different. So I don't know if it's answering.
And yeah, because it's also about the expectation from audiences, but also from, of course, politics, and of course there's a lot also of economical stakes. So you were also, Tim, when we were discussing, you were talking about how you worked for the festival because you are programming a lot of interdisciplinary work, and it's the Circus Dance Festival, so there is something also in the artistic definition of the festival that is said in the title. But you told me that you were also working a lot around not only the form that were shown, but also the necessity to work around those forms in order to have discussions, texts, really global thinking about this interdisciplinarity, so to, not to say to prepare the ground, but in a way also to make them possible to be seen and shared.
Yeah, maybe let me start. Yeah, what you said, like we're with the title of our festival, like we're called Circus Dance Festival, and when we initiated this festival, we thought like, okay, it's really like easy, you know what you get, like circus and dance, or something between circus and dance, or hybrid forms. You can interpret it how you like, but like that is in a sense interesting for artists that feedback us, hey, wow, I never knew in which category I would fall, and here, wow, I have a place. It's nice that you call the festival like this. At the other hand, there's like it's interesting what it makes with the expectations of the audience. It's somehow helpful, like sometimes that it gives a certain freedom to putting like in this field between circus and dance. I mean, it puts two categories, but it opens also a wide field. So nobody complains like, hey, but this is not circus, or this is not this or that. So that gives us somehow a certain freedom in like giving a title with this category. And somehow I like this also seeing in other festivals. I have another example from Vienna. It's on the Edge Festival, and they call themselves Festival for Experimental Circus. And I find this hilarious in a way, because like it's very clear, like so they can program like really experimental stuff and nobody complains. And first of all, but like also even people like go there especially for that. So I find this interesting, like to build up an audience who's really onto that. Because there's always the question of expectations coming to a circus festival. Is it too public? Is it for who is it? What's the target? So yeah, that's why I'm with this title. That as a little comment. Then I find it. I mean, I really work with my own artistic work in between circus and dance. I receive dance funding in Germany. I came with a circus background from ESAC to Germany, in a country where there is no circus funding, and I came with an interest for dance. But now I'm based there. I receive dance funding, and I call myself a choreographer. So there's certain influences, and out of that, of course, there's also this festival what was initiated. So I find it very interesting, like to counterpose sometimes like a circus work with a dance work, and like just there's different approaches, maybe of, I don't know, how you work with slowness, how you look at the body. There's there's different approaches. The circus, of course, with its limits and playing with borders, and well, this is only examples, but I like it as we can use it as a surprise sometimes, especially when I think of us also coming from the sector, and it's somehow good to see a piece out of a different art form. So there's this maybe. What I want to say about festival, and like, of course, there's, as a producing festival, we produce artists time by time. We would love to do that more. That always depends on finances, but like I think that's very important for artists to have this support, and also us not just buying a finished form, but like really investing into the artist and accompanying this work. So we become less a programmer buying something ready, but like more accompanying institution somehow. I think that's very important, and for artists, but also for us as a festival. Then of course residencies. Well, but I want to put more, do examples of projects that we do besides like all this festival program. Part of the festival program is, for example, we just launched the open call for forms, short forms that are written for 360 degrees. So that means the audience all around. And that was the basic idea of the festival. It's also even the logo, it's different geometric forms of circles. And so we bought this 360-degree outdoor stage. So we have this round stage with a truss so we can show aerial work. And so then because we like this idea, there's a lot of forms written for that. A bit tricky, outdoor, of course, specific context, but so we were really interested like to search for, and that's why we launched this open call, to see what is there, because of course we cannot see so much, to be realistic, but really to have it open who approaches us, to find forms that are really dramaturgically or physically written in this setting where just, yeah, you have to perform on all sides. So really, maybe a bit going to the core of Circus, one could say. Yeah.
What I think what is interesting in a way, you as a festival, you invent new, well, not new spaces, but you invent spaces so that new writings could emerge. So you create the right condition for this to happen in a way. Well, afterwards, of course, any artist can do whatever he or she wants, but you kind of create some conditions so that things could be possible. And I think for me this is important because when I was talking with you two, I really thought of you two as facilitators. In a way, in the ecosystem, you have the artists, you have the institution, the festival, you have the funders, but in between you have all those people. In French, Howard Baker, who is a sociologist, he's not French, he's American, but in French, I don't know if there is an English translation, he talks about les membres de renfort, so people supporting. And the whole art ecosystem is based on people supporting, and you are those people making small things visible. So I was wondering also at the example that you gave, Tim, about creating this space so that something could happen. How also, perhaps, Caroline, you work on this, creating collaboration in your work, making some artists visible that would stay invisible if there was not this work of collaboration. You talked about some visual artists, for example, from Serbian visual artists, and also to understand what is all the work behind making new things or emergent things visible, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe just to rebound on what you were saying about the festival, and also to precise that globally in Teatroscope area, there's not so many, actually very few cultural offers, permanent cultural offers in the field of dance and circus. So the audience can discover circus mostly through festivals. And the festival organizers, they're very aware that the audience has not so many opportunities to see circus, contemporary circus whatsoever. And for example, Circo Balkana Festival, so in Zagreb and Belgrade, they hosted the Out of the Blue show. So I don't know if you saw that show, but it's in an aquarium. And it was a massive success in Belgrade and Zagreb. And so for many people, at least in Belgrade, it was their very first circus show that they were seeing in their whole life. So it's also very interesting how the choices of the organizers of the festival can also influence how the whole generation, new generation will look on circus and what kind of image they will have about circus.
Yeah, this shows also the responsibility presenters, programmers, and institution hold, because as you say, you build the way we look at a circus artwork by programming artwork in an area. Yeah. So it's a huge responsibility also.
Yeah, and also I think for me, those organizers are very aware that they are seeing shows in Western Europe that people in the Southeastern Europe, they don't have so many opportunities to see. So they kind of are very careful of, okay, what can we show the audience there to also to raise awareness or to give them more, correct picture of circus in all its complexity and diversity. So they're really doing a kind of groundwork for me on that level. And talking about other fields, we are really trying to develop bilateral cooperation between French organizations and regional organizations or Serbian organizations. And this year there was a nice example of collaboration between the Visual Arts Biennale in Lyon and in Belgrade. And it was interesting because it allowed some French artists to show their work in Serbia, in Belgrade. And there was also some Serbian artists invited at the Lyon Biennale. So, yeah, this one is not a... Yeah, this one, so the artist is called Nadezhda Kirshansky. So this was shown at Villeurbanne Institut d'Art Contemporain in Villeurbanne in the program of International Young Creation. So this is a waiting room, kind of typical Yugoslavian waiting room in a hospital. So that was, this artist could show her work in the frame of Lyon Biennale thanks to this collaboration between the Biennale. So it's also through also kind of big cultural institutions, then it's also spreading on other levels of the same artistic field. For example, there is also collaboration between the Museum of Contemporary Art in Lyon and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Belgrade. They will have joint exhibitions with the collections of the two museums. So for me, it's also facilitating the encountering between organizations and director or programmers, because then they can talk the same language. They can share common stakes and common visions, and also, I mean, they know the best what kind of projects they want to develop. So it's also kind of adjusting the encounterings between organizations so that it can also develop on the long run, with or without French Institute. So that was, I mean, we hope that this collaboration will go on in the future.
Tim, you wanted to say something about, no, because I was looking at
yeah,
you.
I want to respond to the work with the bodies in water. It's out of the blue, right? Yeah. I didn't see this work, but it makes me think of a work of Jörg Müller, which is a German artist who works in France. And maybe it connects a little bit, yeah, how do we see? So what I see also as my work as a curator, or my passion, is like to create a certain context also around these works, or what we can see more than only this moment that we pass. So this is one thing of a piece, that it can just be there and we can see it. And there's sometimes I like it to create more knowledge also, or reference points maybe, that's it, around. So for example here, Jörg Müller is an artist, like in the 90s, he created a work which is called New Tube. So with a big tube of water around 2 meters high, and he basically puts his body in there. And so it's interesting, like this work was created in the 90s. Now we had like more circus festivals in Germany. His work was more and more invited, so he got the opportunity to perform it more and more in Germany. So it was a bit like coming back, because the country changed, the acknowledgement of the art form. But I want to dive a little bit more into this work a little bit. That's also one of our passions, of creating context. So, for example, Julian, but also Jörg Müller's work are a nice example. If, for example, to talk about the non-human turn. So circus works that we can dedicate to this somehow, this kind of movement. So that means like to think differently about our environment, and to give the same attention to processes, to objects, to human and non-human entities. So, and this work of Jörg Müller is one very interesting example, as like he was invited in the 90s from the choreographer Kitsu Dubois, who's French, and she went like for some scientific researches. Like she went with different artists, notably different circus artists. Among them was Jörg Müller. They went on this parabol flights, so to research on microgravity. So how's the body reacting to microgravity? So basically they're in the plane, and the plane does this for quite a time, and there's always this little moment of a few seconds where there is microgravity. So the body has a very specific notion of space and everything. And what I found, well, first I found very interesting that a choreographer does a scientific research and takes circus artists with her, that I find interesting. But also how Kitsu Dubois described this feeling in microgravity that later then, I just make the link, if you're not in the plane, then water is the material that you can try to get as close to this state of microgravity. So what I found very interesting when she described this notions of feeling that you have in this moment. For example, the perception of the body. For example, she noted you don't have the feeling of having a body anymore. The body enlarges into the space. You perceive the space mostly through your eyes. It becomes very visual, and you have the feeling your body enlarges and becomes part of the space. So this is interesting when we then discuss about what is our place in the world, in the environment, what is the hierarchies between elements, between objects, between humans. Then when we think of Jörg Müller putting his body and letting himself juggle through the water. So because the water is in that sense an environment where it's so strong that he has to position himself in this water and he cannot dominate it anymore so much. So, but it's all this traversée, of course, like from traditional circus dominating the animal, the object, to Nouveau Cirque, contemporary circus, where you change a little bit the view. And I was just going to name this example because for me it opens up so much philosophical thoughts and things we love to think about, and we invite the audience also if they want to think about. We don't force them because everybody's free to just see the piece and enjoy it. But in the festival, for example, we create a magazine which is about circus theoretical thinking, so you couldn't take a deep dive if you like into these thoughts or not.
No, but it's interesting because all the examples that you gave in a way that could be the Jörg Müller or Kitsu Dubois or Julian Vogel, what they do could be shown, of course, in Circus Dance Festival or any circus or dance festival, but perhaps also in galleries and museums. On site-specific creation, and in a way they are all artists that are moving in between things, and sometimes it's difficult also to accompany how do we look at those forms. So do you feel that in your jobs, also in the way you work, there is a part of risk-taking? Because when you also have this collaboration, even though it's a lot of work of having a Serbian artist invited to the Lyon Biennale, it's also a risk. For her, for the institutions supporting her, and so how do you relate also to, as presenters, as institution, relate to this idea of course, a part of risk-taking, because if we're working on emergent, new writing, there is risk-taking, because everything that is experimental, we don't know how people will appear in the work. Or is it part of your job? I mean, is risk also something that you think about? Not physical risk, but more political, aesthetical risk in a way?
For me, we're not the one taking the risks, since we're not programmers. For me, for example, the circus organizations hosting French companies, they are taking the risk. And also, due to the local context in the Theatroscope area, the local partners are very open to international artists, and since there is also funds for a French cooperation, there is a lot of French circus shows coming in the region, in the Southeastern Europe region. So for me, they are taking the risks to invite international shows to an audience which is not so used to see contemporary show. And on the French side, it's also taking the risk of collaborating with some geographical areas whom we are not so familiar with, since we're more focused on more the western side of Europe or even the western side of the world. So like Southeastern Europe region is not so in the scope for the cultural operators in France. And I remember when we were preparing this roundtable, you were saying it's basically encouraging French cultural operator to take the risk to collaborate with some countries and cultural operators and artists who are not in the same aesthetics, who are not trained as much as Western European artists. So artistically, it wouldn't be what you can usually see on stage in Western Europe. So it's also the risk of giving the floor to some countries and artists that you're not so familiar with. And so we can encourage, but then after all, the last word is upon the cultural operators.
Yeah, and you were talking, Tim, as a cultural operator, as a festival director also, that you were talking about creating a safe place also, so that the risk that you take and the risk the artist takes is has borders, and it's difficult to create a safe place when we are talking about sometimes some more radical experimental works, of course.
I mean, we're trying to find a good context for an artwork. So basically, of course, like I know it from myself, from an artist perspective, I'm first busy with, I would love to perform at that festival, or we're in that conversation, a festival asks us, and then either the festival or me as an artist, we have to think, okay, is it the right place? Do we find a good context? And that can be the overall festival, or also like which is the space, how is it announced, what does it need, maybe? Because I think I have a lot with directors, colleagues, this conversation where they tell me, hey, I just want that it's just the artwork, the piece, the performance is in focus. I don't want to have text or introductions, anything around it. It just the piece has to speak for themselves, and I can totally understand that, and I also love that. But I feel there is works that might need something that they're like, that it's better to read them somehow. So there's different kind of works, I feel, because it would be we know that from museums there's a lot of mediation, there's a lot of like saying, hey, this happened, this art is done because of that, out of this time, in this context. And I think this is also valuable for some works in dance or in circus. The other thing is the risk. I talk a lot about risk in my job as a curator. Let's talk about physical risk. So I think circus is often like that. There's a certain physical risk. The artist brings themselves in danger. Let's make it very simple, and we, as the audience, there is a strong impact on that. So the danger can be different forms, but so now I feel there's a shift since a certain time, that there's also like crossing certain borders. As artists, we think of like, how can we cross this border and also make this experience maybe stronger and put the audience in risk, like by just inviting them on the stage, or like really putting a physical risk. And that's a very interesting point, because like it transgresses certain borders, certain habitudes. Like, are you safe there, or is there something flying into your direction and you have to catch it? I have a lot of discussions. I have to mediate between like the artwork, that it has the most freedom to happen, and, for example, the technical direction, the assurances, and there's the boring question, what happens if? So, and as artists, we may not ask this question, and my job is then like to give that the artwork, it can really happen, like it should be, and the technical director will always tell me, okay, but what happens in the worst case? So I'll give 2 examples, like very one strong experience. I love this work of Compagnie In Extremis, Damocles, like a solo. He's working with his big wood planches, and he creates a whole discourse that the audience has to keep them when they're falling. And so he makes the audience somehow in a very clever way taking part, participating in the performance, and he says the whole time, it's a performance. No, but it's not a performance. We do this all together. So he's playing a little bit with this codes. And he's also, what I find interesting, he's a clown, so he really knows like how to work with these borders. And I was there, I saw this piece in Portugal, and I was, after he was surrounded, this performer, by me and other curators, and we were talking like, wow, how do we explain this to our technical directors? Like, and maybe in Germany we're a little bit like maniac about that, with all that rules, and it's a bit boring, but at the same time it's also like interesting, like when we talk about care, we as a festival, we have also the responsibility to take care of the audience. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, did they decide for being in danger? And there's other pieces where we have a lot of this friction points where the artwork or the artists ask of crossing a certain border. For example, taking an audience, and in the work of Elena Zanzu, asking an audience member of being a counterweight. So that means going in the air and being a counterweight for them. So, and there's the question, or my technical director told me, wow, it's a thing to discuss. How do we do that, and how do we ask the audience if they want to take that risk or not?
But I think that the idea of taking care is, of course, very important. It's not taking care in a very it's perhaps it can be very general, but it's also very specific, taking care of audiences, taking care of spaces, taking care of people working, taking care of the artists, taking care, of course, of the institution, of the political forces also. And we see that we deal with a lot of complex things when we support new writings, when we support experimental forms. We have to take care of a lot of parameters in a way, and again, I think it's not that easy. Also, we're talking a lot about circus, performing arts, but we see that the question that are raised here on Circus are also the same question in the field of theater, in the field of dance, in the field of visual arts, installation, performance. And in a way, in contemporary writings, we have this responsibility also to take care, so that perhaps some artistic form can be more visible. And I'm pretty sure that for the artists that were presented in Lyon in the Biennale, or for the curators that came from France for the Biennale in Belgrade, it's not that easy, because you need also to take the time to understand where you are, what you can do, not do. So it's a very subtle, very long also job. Well, this is what I'm feeling from what you're telling us from your experiences.
Yeah, also part of our work, I mean, a big part of our work is also to do mediation between local context and foreign artists, whether French or not. And Tanya Gavrilovic, the coordinator of Theatroscope, we were talking about this roundtable before I was leaving to Paris, and she gave me an example also of one outdoor show that was shown 2 years ago in Bosnia and Serbia. It's a Happy Manif. I don't know if you're familiar. It's audio-guided walk with dancers, and the company asked their local organizers to find a public park so that they can take the audience from one spot and then take them to the final spot. And so in Bosnia-Herzegovina, actually in Sarajevo, in the public park, it was so the organizers suggested this park, and actually during the war, corpses were buried in this park. So it's very, very, not sensitive, but very specific type of place, actually. And so some people told the company, maybe like the day before the performance, and the company said, okay, so we cannot perform there as if we were performing in Butte-Chaumont in Paris. So, I mean, the space was so loaded with tragedy, so then they chose to perform in another park in Sarajevo. So it's also this type of information that we need to give. I mean, we as specifically the local staff of French Institute, which is of course local, and they've been knowing the field for many, many years. So this type of information, if you don't have it, then you can be completely, I mean, reception of the artwork can be completely disturbed, or even not only disturbing, but sometimes offending. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another example. For example, lately we discussed about a work that would, at the end of the performance, invite the audience to come on stage and to dance, basically. And we were discussing about this gesture of, like, is there of consent? Like, we're a bit, I don't know if we're specifically sensible in our festival or in Germany, but like there's cultural differences also. Like I was discussing that with the Italian colleague, and she told me, like, hey, it's not such a big thing. Like in Italy, it's more, very, you can do it. Like just grab the audience member, pull them on stage, and somehow with that, making them part of the performance. And in Germany, it would feel like in our context, it would be nice if there is at least a small gesture of asking before you grab the person, like, do you want to come or not? It's a very small gesture, but like somehow important when you talk about sensibility and consent. So, but maybe also there's cultural differences, and of course that's we think about like in which context again we present, and we sometimes we have to discuss with the artists this or make them aware. Maybe they find a solution or they have a reaction on that, and we enter in a sort of discussion.
Yeah, well, thank you for those very precise examples, because I think that the more we go through your experiences, the most it's interesting, because it's grounded, and we see also for each example how things are very complex and how each example raises questions and the solutions are very specific each time. So perhaps the idea also was to open the debate also to the audience and to you also artists, presenters, and whoever you are, perhaps normal audiences, as we call them sometimes. And we wanted also, you can ask questions, but perhaps to start with, we will ask you a question, or we will ask you some question. And perhaps one of something that has been started to be discussed, but we can discuss it also more collectively, would be the possibility to take care collectively also about those questions, and to have a greater dialogue between the different people in the sector. It's also about the question of the responsibility, this shared responsibility. Perhaps it can be an open discussion also about these new writings, experimental writings, on how, so if you want to talk from your place, your role, your job, how do we collectively discuss this question of shared responsibility? So Tim gave an answer, Caroline gave an answer from their part, but perhaps there are also other answers in the audience. And of course, if you have some question, you can ask them, but it's also to have something that we can really discuss more collectively. And now everyone is very afraid about talking about his or her responsibility. Well, the idea is how we talked about the question of the responsibility in risk-taking. So from where we are, where we work as an artist, as a presenter, as a festival director, or whatever, as an institution, what is our responsibility? Where do we put our responsibility in taking risks to see new forms of writing, experimental, sometimes radical writings? I always say that the very good thing of being a researcher is that you don't have any responsibilities, and it's you have a total liberty about talking about artwork and risk-taking, because you don't have any financial interest, for example, in the game. So this would be from my part as a researcher, but if I talk from my role as an artist, of course it's very different. I can take risk as a researcher that I can't take as an artist, for example. So it's interesting to see what are the possibilities and impossibilities. And of course we have Jarko over there. Thanks to be there, Jarko, because you're asking all the questions, and it's wonderful.
Well, this time I'm not asking question, because you asked a question already. I've been thinking about risk quite a lot from a presenter and organization perspective. Circo has taken a lot of risks in the past, and the organization, developing the organization was a risk. And some of those risks didn't pan out. And the bills have to be paid at some point. And I think the responsibility for a presenter or an organization is to try to create an organizational structure where it is safe to take risks, so that the organization still exists, so that new risks can be taken. And I think that's a very profound structural question, which is very contextual, like how is the organization funded? Where does the funding come from? And how is the annual structure done in such a way that there is a context where risk can be taken? I'm looking at this from a kind of year-round programmer's perspective, where there are different profiles during the year, so that we have at least a limited slot, for example, a festival that can take a lot of risks and things are balanced, and we can do the festival the next year as well.
Thank you. It's really interesting. You really talk about the complexity of it, of course. I don't know if you want to say something to add, Tim, yeah? Or
Yeah, I can of course very much relate to this. There is, yeah, as a festival, yeah, you have the responsibility also to make sure first that there's an audience, that there's funding. So there's a lot of things we need to somehow fulfill or to communicate, make it visible to the politics, and so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's true if, for example, if we take too much, sometimes we talk about taking artistic risk and showing works that are maybe a bit like, with a certain artistic risk. I mean, we would need to talk longer about what this is. I think it's more about creating the right context for this work. For example, what I said in Vienna, like an experimental work in that festival, it's much easier than in a tout public festival where they always showed like very different kind of works, and then suddenly beams, and maybe then nobody's coming. So of course, as a organizer, you need to juggle a little bit how to make sure also that on the long term you can take this artistic risks in brackets, and not only one time. That would be a pity. So yeah, it's a constant juggling of these risks or responsibilities, maybe in different directions, like how to give space to the art, like I just said, and also to fulfill also all these needs that this space where the art becomes visible can stay and not goes down.
I don't know if you have any other thoughts in your audience on this question, perhaps. Yes.
Hello, my name is Quintijn, and I will try to reply this question from the perspective of an artist. Voilà, so I still didn't really get the whole question. It's many questions in one, so I will try to formulate some kind of an answer to a part of it. So about the shared responsibility, I think the shared responsibility from the point of view of the artist, yes, we can all say it's a shared responsibility, but what's my share? I think my share as an artist would be to resist somehow, to resist and persist somehow in the way you feel that the path you have to follow, and to resist to shortcuts that are proposed from everywhere and shortcuts that are proposed in many different approaches from audiences, from programmers, from field, from schools. There's only one way, and that's the one that you have to sculpt. So I think that's a main thing. And I think from this perspective, we could talk about many points that have been discussed. Yeah, I mean, it's always that's the thing with the question, I think, and so my answer is a bit the same as the question. It goes around, so take what you want, and we leave the rest.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I think from my point of view or my direction is it's difficult to not reduce everything to a problem. I think there's many problems in the world, and I mean, it was said as artists you should know a lot, you should know very much. I don't know, how said it this morning?
This morning, that what you should, all your references and what you should know, the knowledge and
Yeah, but she did
no, you should know your history.
Yeah, Antonia, she said you have to know too much to be an artist. I think that's the thing, but then also there's a problem there. So there's a thing, you want to reduce it to a problem. So let's try to find somehow solutions. And voila, I talked a lot. I think I will shut up.
No, but it's also that what you're saying about being an artist and taking risk and the notion of risk for artists, of course, and we already talked of it this morning, but it's different from a context to another.
Yeah.
I mean, taking risks in Serbia is not the same as taking risks in France. Absolutely not. And of course, how do we also, as European, people working in a European perspective, take this into account to build the collaborations you were also talking about, Caroline, before. This idea of, okay, let's say that more cultural operators from Western Europe, for example, build more cooperation, collaboration with other regions in Europe, and have a better notion of, for example, what is experimental and risk-taking in those countries for the artists in those countries, for example.
Yeah, I get, from that point of view, when you talk about risk as an artist, I think we should just accept that making art is taking risks, and it's a gamble, and it's not gonna be something else somehow. If it's not a gamble anymore, and if you don't go with it with the intention that I might fail, but I might also discover something else, then you should get another job, I think. So that's part of it, but this responsibility concerns everyone who is involved with the creative process, and the word curating actually means caring. Yeah. So we talk about the same thing, and I think there should be more curating in our field. There should be more curating and less programming. So from my perspective, thank you.
Totally agree.
And there is a very good book that is called Radicalizing Care, about new creating practices in performance and visual arts, that I strongly recommend on precisely this question. I think there was someone else that wanted to talk in the audience, perhaps. Perhaps, Jakob, before you talk, there was someone else.
Very short addition, because it was so beautiful said earlier that there is a difference between danger and risk. Separating existential danger from taking risk.
It reminds me also of a conference that many of us maybe have been, safer space for Circus. So that's another words. It's a little bit this what you said. So to create safer spaces where we can take certain risks.
Hello, I'm Gaia Vimercati from Italy, Milano. And I work both as a researcher, independent researcher, and as a cultural programmer. And so, yeah, this question resonated a lot with my work. On the research point, as a researcher, I feel a lot of responsibility, especially in finding the ways of producing meaning and a discourse. Because to me, it's very important to produce a discourse that doesn't over-determine the artists. And I think this is a practice. I mean, in my research, my main concerns are in which ways, which tools do I develop in order to produce a discourse that can be dangerous for someone, and so this is a question. So as a researcher, I feel a lot of responsibility in my meaning-making practices. Also, as a programmer, I really feel the risk. And I agree that the risk is shared, but up to some point, because as a programmer, I feel that I have to take more responsibilities than the artist, mostly because I take accountability also of the festival as a whole. So, and also as a programmer, like the artists are always paid, but in the uncertainties that I often work, you know, sometimes you don't know if you get the money until you make choices. And so, but a thing that I want to make sure always is that the artists are paid, for example. So, yes, so I feel a lot of responsibility in taking the risks. And I think that sometimes programmers have to take more risk than the artist.
Yeah.
If you have Tim and Caroline things also to say, and of course you're welcome to answer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel also like as a festival already. I see also festivals as sort of institutions. So this institution should also spread its money somehow and give it to the art and the artists. So I feel also like I see my job also like giving the most space to the artists, that they don't have to think so much about all these constraints that maybe I have to deal with. So try somehow keeping it away. Also, like I said, spreading the money maybe by supporting. So money flow. Yeah, that's it for now.
Perhaps the last two people, 5 minutes, okay? Yeah, I think we started a little bit late, so yeah.
I'm gonna be fast. I'm Teresa from Cordata 4, also Italy. And I just wanted to add something when we talk about risk-taking and how Tim is working in supporting productions. And I believe in supporting productions. I'm an artist and I run a company, an organization. From my experience, I adore when I get support, economical support for the productions, but what I feel it will really support a shared risk-taking is to build a trust relationship with who's supporting me. And a way to dialogue, a way to speak with each other, which is sincere, which allows the artist to fail or not to fail, but that it doesn't stop in the moment I failed. So these are two things that I want to say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there is a beautiful subject on failure also that can be the theme of a whole next conference. Vincent?
Just a very quick thing. As a artistic mentor of Circus Next, I feel, and about the risk-taking, I feel big, and also because it's Circus Next, I think it's important to note that, because there's a lot of risk-taking also in finding new writings. I find that we as artists have the responsibility to learn how to present unfinished work. It's both ways. It's like how we discuss, as you said, this trust relationship that you're mentioning. I think it's every way.
Yeah, I was just wanted to come back to the risk in the idea of the risk for the circus artist in itself. And I think there is a couple of words which we have to put together: risk and control, because the circus artist is always between the two. I mean, he's taking risks, but he's controlling a lot. And I was wondering, when I was listening to you, what do you think about this? But if there wouldn't be something particular, a sort of particular ability for the circus artist to go in the space between, like you were speaking about, because of this ability to find a good balance between control and risk, and so an ability, for instance, to open a new field like ceramic, like diving, like, I don't know, papers, like in Balbenaim. Or so we see a lot of circus artists who are able, we can see at least that they are able to completely dive in another field and being nearly expert in this field. So is there any DNA somewhere which opened the possibility of this more than in some other disciplines? I don't know.
I would say certainly it's a strength of circus. So yeah, what you say, this being in control, playing with this limits until where we can control. And it maybe comes a little bit to what I was saying earlier, so that there's maybe in different fields, there's a lot of artists that's doing apnea in the moment, no? Which is really like the limit of, your breath, your body in the deep diving. I directly have to think of this work that I just explained of Cirque en Extremis, where I feel it's really there. Like I said, it's not only there, the physical acrobat knowledge or circus artist knowledge, also despite from acrobatic or physical, like also this clowning, how to work with the audience. So I think there's a lot of knowledge, and there it becomes interesting for me if like the practice has there is a certain specific knowledge that circus art has, and I think this is very interesting to spread, also to talk about more. And I think there's a lot of artists that work around that, that maybe also detach circus art from other art forms very strongly in that specific point.
I don't know, Caroline, from your experience also working in the circus field and the street art field, if you have any answer to this, or
just to share something that I thought about when I was listening to the comments from the audience, and also because I had a word from Jadranka in mind. So Circo Balkana is in Serbia and Croatia, and they're working hand to hand, sharing vision, means, values, and also Jadranka was saying also joy and friendship. So it's also the idea of trust building and community and like togetherness, meaning also artists with programmers. So I mean, sharing the risk is kind of easier within this community.
Last thing, Tim.
Yes, just because now we didn't talk about it, but there's also a whole part of responsibility of an institution, I think, which goes like in the direction of institutional critique, or we could say more institutional care. So there's all this part of like reflecting about power structures, working on inclusion and accessibility. There's different fields. There's also like to think about working conditions, of course, artists paid, but also the whole stuff, hierarchies, maybe putting up a sort of way of working of self-reflection and a feedback that, so all this what needs to be established in an institution, and then of course like who makes a decision, maybe in Germany, for example, we have a lot of artistic teams curating or directing institutions, not one person anymore. So how do you bring different people in the curational process? So equity, gender representation. So I think that's to make one point is also when we just talked about Cri de Caméléon, which is now 95, so 30 years ago, but like when we look at, there it was a male graduation, only men, the male director, and a male knack direction. So that's interesting. Okay, from there we come. Where are we today? So to look at this kind of things. So there's a lot of responsibilities, I think, and work that we have to do as an institution, of course, and in the whole field.
Yeah, I think this is a very important conclusion, and also changing pedagogies, changing work organization to change what will be on stage also. If you want to change things, it's not only what we see, but it's also everything that comes around. So I think this is a very strong question for the sector also to be discussed, and institutional critique is really important. And perhaps to conclude also, the idea of this round table was to open up also to other fields, not only circus, and to see that question that circus is perhaps asking, circus actors are asking themselves are also relevant in other fields and perhaps for a longer time. And again, I would advocate that we look more to the other fields of dance theater and visual arts, because a lot of questions that were raised today have been raised for the past 10 years in the visual arts sectors, like the one that you're raising on on accessibility and diversity. So thank you very much, and we need to stop now. I'm really sorry. Thank you very much.